Everyone used to say we were the kind of couple people hope to become someday. I heard it for 55 years at family gatherings, at church socials, from neighbors leaning over fences, from friends of our children who had grown up watching us move through the world side by side. You two are the real thing, they would say. You can feel it the moment you walk into a room with them. And I would smile. I would reach for his hand. I would lean into him naturally, automatically, the way you lean towards something familiar after enough years. And I would think, yes, we are the real thing. For a very long time, I believed that completely. I am 81 years old now. My husband died 14 months ago. And I am about to tell you something I have never told anyone. Not my children, not my sister, not the woman from the grief group who sat across from me every Tuesday afternoon asking gentle questions about loss and healing and memory. I am saying it now because I think there are women listening who know this feeling already, even if they have never put words to it. And because I am old enough now to understand that pretending can become a person's entire life if they are not careful. When my husband died, I expected grief. I knew grief. I had watched it happen to other women. I watched my mother after my father passed away. I watched her move through the house like someone carrying invisible weight in both hands, quietly unraveling over years instead of days. I thought that would happen to me too. But what I felt sitting in that hospital room after the machines began falling silent one by one was something stranger than grief, something more complicated. It was not happiness. It was not devastation exactly either. It was something I did not have language for then. The closest word I have now is space. It felt like walking into a room that had always been crowded, a room so full of furniture you had spent decades turning your body sideways just to move through it. And then suddenly one morning everything is gone. The room is empty, open, quiet, and for the first time in your life, you can stand up straight. He saw me as a woman who was content to follow his lead. And because I had entered his life so young, and because his certainty was so much stronger than my own at the beginning, I slowly became that version of myself without ever conscious. But standing up straight after so many years does not feel triumphant the way people imagine it would. It feels confusing. It feels disloyal. It feels like relief wrapped tightly inside sorrow until you can no longer separate one from the other. And I spent many months deciding that made me a terrible woman. The truth is less dramatic than people expect. We met when I was 24 years old. He was handsome in that clean, confident way men used to be, certain about himself, certain about the future, certain about where life was supposed to go and who was supposed to go there with him. And I had spent most of my young life uncertain about nearly everything. So his certainty felt safe to me. It felt solid. I stepped into it the way a tired person steps inside during a storm, grateful for the shelter before ever asking who designed the house. At the time, I mistook certainty for wisdom. I think many young women did. He was not cruel. I need to say that clearly because this is not a story about cruelty. He was, by nearly every visible measure, a good man. He worked hard. He stayed faithful. He paid the bills. He showed up. He sat at the dinner table every night. He fixed broken cabinets. He held my hand during funerals. He lay beside me in bed for 55 years. From the outside, there was nothing missing. But there is a kind of loneliness that comes not from being unloved, but from being only partially known, not ignored, not mistreated, just slightly unseen, yesly choosing it. Or maybe I only performed it long enough that eventually I could no longer tell the difference. It took me decades to understand that peace and surrender are not always the same thing. There were thoughts I never voiced because conversations moved too quickly around him. By the time I had formed an opinion, he had already arrived at one for both of us. There were places I wanted to visit that never fit into the plans he had already made. I remember once, sometime in my 40s, standing in the kitchen holding a brochure for a painting class at the community center. It was a silly little thing, just Wednesday evenings for 6 weeks. I had not painted since I was a girl. He glanced at the paper while loosening his tie and said almost absent-mindedly, "You'd get bored after 2 classes." And I laughed like he was probably right. I threw the brochure away after dinner. I remember another evening years later when we were driving home from a party. Everyone had spent the night talking about him, his stories, his opinions, the way he could fill a room without even trying. And I sat beside him in the dark car thinking something so awful, I still feel ashamed saying it aloud now. I remember thinking, if I vanished tomorrow, how long would it take before anyone noticed something was missing besides him? That thought stayed with me for years, quietly, like a splinter under the skin. There were mornings I woke up with some small spark inside me, an idea, a curiosity, a direction I wanted to follow, and by noon it had quietly disappeared beneath the shape of his day, his preferences, his momentum. And the strangest part is that I do not think he ever realized it was happening. That is the difficult thing to explain to people. He was not taking pieces of me deliberately. He was simply so completely himself that there was very little room left beside him for another person to unfold fully too. And I became so practiced at shrinking gently, politely, invisibly, that eventually I stopped noticing the movement altogether. A woman can disappear for years before anyone realizes she is gone. The word for this is not abuse. The word for this is not misery. The word for this, I think, is erasure, a slow and mutual erasure where one person becomes smaller over time, and the other never notices because the shrinking happens quietly enough to pass for harmony. And I never spoke about it. Not once in 55 years did I say aloud, "I think I am disappearing inside this marriage." Not because I feared him, I feared what the truth would do once it had been spoken. And here is the confession that still makes me feel cruel even now. There were moments after his death when I felt more lonely during our marriage than I did standing alone at his funeral. I loved him. That is what makes that sentence so difficult to carry. Because if I admitted any of this, then I would also have to admit that the life everyone admired so deeply, the marriage people pointed toward as proof that lasting love still existed, had a fracture running silently through the center of it. A fracture we had both learned to step around so gracefully that eventually even we stopped seeing it. So instead, I kept moving. I raised children. I hosted holidays. I folded laundry. I tended the garden. I stood beside him in photographs, smiling the smile people expected from a woman who had built a successful life. And I reached for his hand every time someone called us inspiring. Now he is gone. And for the first time since I became an adult, there is no larger certainty filling the rooms around me. There is only mine, whatever mine is. Whatever remains of me after all these years of reflecting myself against another person. I did not expect this stage of life to feel so strange or so alive. I walk through the house differently now, slowly sometimes, curiously. I make tiny decisions that would sound ridiculous to anyone else. What time I eat dinner, which lamp stays in the living room, whether I leave dishes in the sink until morning simply because I feel like it. And every one of those decisions feels enormous to me, not because the choices themselves matter so much, but because they belong entirely to me. I planted roses last spring. He always thought roses were impractical, too delicate, too much trouble to maintain properly. I planted them anyway. Most of them are struggling, if I am honest. I am still learning what they need. But every morning I go outside with dirt on my hands and I think, these were my choice. For 55 years we ate dinner at 6 o'clock because that was when he preferred to eat. Now sometimes I eat at 9. Sometimes I eat standing at the kitchen counter. Sometimes I have toast and fruit and call it enough. These are such small things, I know that. But I think a human life is mostly made of small things. And I think I spent 55 years arranging mine around someone else's rhythms so carefully that I stopped hearing my own. I am not telling you this because I did not love him. I loved him very much. In many ways, he loved me too. I am telling you this because I think genuine love, the kind where two people remain entirely themselves while still choosing each other every day, is far rarer than most of us are willing to admit. And I think many women from my generation accepted something close enough to love that we never examined it too closely. We called it devotion. We called it stability. We called it marriage. And sometimes it was those things. But sometimes it was also disappearance. I am not asking anyone listening to leave their life behind. I am not asking you to destroy your marriage or become someone reckless and unrecognizable. I am only asking you to look honestly at your own reflection inside the life you built. Because if you are still alive, there is still time. Time to speak the thoughts you keep swallowing. Time to make room for desires that have spent decades waiting politely in the corner. Time to plant the roses someone else said were too much trouble. Time to discover who you are when there is no louder certainty drowning out your own voice. I spent 55 years being one half of something everyone admired, and sometimes now, late at night, sitting alone in this quiet house, I wonder what it might have felt like to spend a little more time becoming whole.